Corey, what's up?
Hello, Alisa. Welcome. What is your take on narrative storytelling, and specifically from the point of view of a brand?
Yeah, I think that narrative storytelling for a B2B brand is very innovative. It's like you can find B2B podcast on Spotify, Apple, but it's such a small percentage compared to all the B2C or just like non-business podcasts. And I personally really like hearing like how a company got started, the behind the scenes. I love those stories, especially for B2B.
I have so many different opinions on it, and I'm going to save the audience and I'll save you, but I will
Well,
say,
give me one at least.
so here's my thoughts. To me, the big thing about narrative in the B2B context, especially, you have to look at B2C, like Patagonia, clearly narrative. Ferrari.
I mean, some of those B2C brands have like full books. Like if you
Right.
think about Starbucks, Patagonia, all those.
It would be a big investment, like it's like a big risk and a big investment. But I actually think it could go big, right? Like if Microsoft was telling the story of their founding story and the
But
history
that's
of
a big
Microsoft.
company.
But it's B2B, right? It doesn't have that Patagonia or the Ferrari story to lean on, or the B2C angle. But if somebody could pull it off, then you build a platform, and I think you build like something that also can. Yeah, I think a success in the B2B narrative storytelling space would be really disruptive. To me, it's high risk, high return. Anyway, that is my perspective. Why don't you take us into the episode, Alisa?
I think I want to know from the listeners, do you think a narrative podcast is worth the risk? Is it high risk, high reward? I want to hear what people think, so take a listen.
Hey, I'm Em. I'm a podcaster, a producer, creative director. I've worked in creative and marketing for about 15 years. Myself and the team at Stories, who I've worked with for many years, were recently nominated for a Webby for Best Branded Podcast. And I think that speaks a lot to a deep and abiding passion for narrative storytelling, which kind of drives every creative endeavor that I'm a part of.
I want to start out by asking you, what do you think it means to have a narrative podcast? Like any kind of narrative content, even in B2B, like what is that? What is it?
So when we say narrative podcasting, there is typically more of a structure to the story that you're weaving together. It involves a lot more research and reporting, I think, than your average conversational or chat cast.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that takes you on a journey, but it's an extremely refined and intentionally crafted thing, right? You're essentially writing a script, writing a story, and then you're bringing all of those candid moments together, all those candid moments are woven together by the narrative of the host or multiple hosts. So I think it goes beyond like storytelling to kind of say there's a beginning, middle, and end to what we're actually getting into.
And the strategy behind it is a little bit different in like that B2B context, because you're not just thinking of like, what's a good story? You're thinking, what's a good story for this company to tell its customers or prospective customers. And, we talk about we use this word story all the time in B2B, and it can mean a lot of things. It can mean a customer story. It can mean a story about the product, but narrative storytelling is like, I don't know. I think it's almost like finding the story that's relevant.
Yeah, and it's not just finding the relevant story, but elevating it too, right? Bringing it into, it's really about like the not just the format, but like the delivery. Because you're delivering this to someone in a way that's going to elicit, hopefully, an emotional reaction, whether that emotion is delight or, uh, you know, um, like introspection or, longing, whatever the emotion you're trying to elicit, it goes back to how you want people to engage with and perceive your brand. It's all about positioning, right? And so you're positioning yourself to be, let's say, a brand that cares about the environment, and you want to tell stories about ways in which your industry impacts the environment, both positively, maybe negatively, and the things that we're looking forward to in the future to, you know, make changes and grow beyond where we are. And so a company that is positioned like that really wants those stories to be inspiring. And in order to inspire people in that context, you got to make them feel something, right? You have to make them feel connected emotionally, perhaps on a deep level, to that journey.
Yeah, you're really taking them on, like, thinking about story arc. You're taking them from one place, maybe finding that piece of conflict, and then, bringing them back down. If I think about just like the normal storytelling,
Mhm.
framework, you have to think about all of that from an emotional standpoint to connect with the audience.
And I think narrative podcasting as an art form has come so far that for it to be adopted in the business world, by both B2C and B2B companies, it makes perfect sense, right? It's an evolution. And I think so many people within that industry have absorbed narrative content to the point that they think, well, I want our customers to feel what I felt when I listened to that thing. And so it kind of trickles down.
Yeah, it seems like that's a trend we're kind of starting to see. I mean, I remember when we were doing research, there is a handful of podcasts that we could go to, like
Mhm.
B2B specifically, with that
Mhm.
narrative storytelling format. And now it seems like more and more are adopting it. Um, but the same, I would say their B2B is also adopting it with videos and serialized content. You see it in a lot. That storytelling is kind of leveled up in a way in the B2B
Mhm.
world.
Absolutely. And it takes on all forms, not always narrative. But I think at the heart of it, there is like a human centric reason for this messaging, right? Or this
Mhm.
positioning, because that's all we really have to go on, right? All we really have to relate to is, how does this affect me? How does this affect the world around me? And when
Eh,
you understand that on a deep level, uh, then you create buy-in, right? You
mhm.
create that sense of connection. The brand goes beyond being a thing on the shelf to um, a figure in your life.
What a paradigm shift, because in the past, or even I would say even in the present with a lot of brands, B2B content is known as being dry,
Mhm,
forgettable,
mhm,
or maybe trying too hard. I don't know if you have seen the "Hey Bestie" trends.
mhm.
"Hey Bestie, let me show you how to do your hair." And then B2B brands tried to do it, like, "Hey Bestie, I have a tool for you," and it just, like, did not work. How does narrative storytelling help B2B brands get that right without trying to copy other trends?
So the example you gave is interesting because I think what makes those trends successful is that there is a person
Mhm.
that is forging a parasocial relationship with their audience.
Yeah.
So the audience feels like, we know this person, we trust this person. And it's difficult because what I see most often is brands will delegate that role to one or more, often too many people. And the audience doesn't really know those people, and they don't get to know those people. So you're asking for trust of a mysterious kind of nebulous figurehead, within the brand. And that's difficult. I mean, why do you think brands adopt mascots or spokespeople? Because it's like, oh, I know this person. I recognize that voice or that face. And, that's how that works. So I think in this narrative storytelling format, in any kind of content creation, the more the audience feels connected to the person who's bringing that storytelling to them, bringing that story forth, or bringing that information to bear, that is what I've seen missing. And so I think narrative allows brands to get some of this right and to really cut their teeth on like true, deep narrative by calling attention to these figures, people you may or may not know of, but woven together by a voice that is consistent enough that you'll get to know them.
You feel connected.
And you start to feel connected. You start to look forward to their voice and their face and their delivery and their personality. And that creates other problems, right? Because then if that voice goes away, it hurts.
You feel the loss.
You feel the loss. But if you have a customer that feels the loss of that individual, that representative, then you're doing something right, I think.
What are some examples that you've seen of any, like it can be podcast, video, anything where a company really nailed it?
Oh, man.
And I mean, we can talk about our Webby-nominated podcast, Traceroute, because, it did make the top 25 in tech podcasts. I mean, there's some merit there. It's not just because it's our project.
It's an interesting thing. I'd have to say probably at the root of why Traceroute worked was Jacob. Yeah.
Interesting. I did not expect you to say that. Jacob was on this podcast, actually.
That's right.
Okay, for anyone who didn't listen to the episode of Jacob, who is Jacob? How was he connected to this project?
Yeah, so Jacob Smith was a founder of a company called Packet, which was brought into Equinix, who builds data centers all over the world. He's unique in that he straddles that line between business-minded and extremely passionate and creative about things. I think he's invested in a podcasting company now. And he brought this idea of telling stories about the internet, the infrastructure, like not just its history, but all the hidden parts of the infrastructure world, the things that impact our lives so immensely, and we overlook them 99% of the time.
So it really started with his vision.
Yeah, his passion for it, right? He said, I want to tell this story, and I believe that there are people in my world who would love this story.
And I mean, talk about a key internal stakeholder. Someone within the company who's like, I have a creative vision. I just need a partner to carry this out.
Yeah, and his influence within that sector of Equinix really, I think, allowed the space to then tell those stories that made the show what it is.
And there are stories that matter. He knew his audience well enough to say, like, this is what they're going to care about. And also, he didn't just care about the unseen pieces of infrastructure. He cared about the unseen people behind the scenes. Like, he wanted to share their stories and talk about their part of building the internet.
You know what it is? It's his love of storytelling that infused the entire project with this prerogative, right? Hey, first and foremost, I don't want this to be about products. I don't want this to be about the brand. I want the brand to bring these stories to the table. And so by extension, right, the person who's telling the story and the brand that is backing them It's in a way no different than someone sponsoring content and the content creator
It's
saying, hey,
almost
thanks to so-and-so for making this possible, right? You are a patron of this art form.
But it's almost like from a marketing perspective, it's like the anti brand awareness campaign, right?
It
Because
is
it
very
wasn't
different
like,
thinking. Yep.
let's tell everybody about our company and make sure everyone knows who we are. It's like, let's tell a story, a lot of stories, compelling stories, bring people in that way. And then, like, they get to know us as a company as a
Mhm.
result. Like, lead with a story, end with the brand.
I think so. I think that's right. I see in like B2B marketing and most marketing, right? It's like, what's the problem? Here's the solution, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
defining the problem and then a solution. And you're using, voices, you're using people, you're using like a microcosm of storytelling to try and relate this problem and the solution to people. But where is the like human journey, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think those types of, on that side of things, that messaging and those campaigns, I think are far more effective when you really feel like there is a story, right? And you have to take out that like problem and solution, and you have to convert that to conflict and resolution. They're the same things. They're
Mm-hmm.
just, I think the perception is different.
It's still a story. Both are stories.
Yep.
One is just more emotional and compelling than the other.
Yeah. But I mean, think about how many killer ad campaigns have been all about like that emotional. I mean, every like killer Christmas
Yeah.
ad for the past like 50 years has really, whatever product they're selling, they are banking on the fact that like, oh man, Christmas is the one time a year that I go see my family and we actually
Yeah.
like
Like I
get
think of Hallmark,
along.
like
Mhm.
all you have to say is Hallmark and people are like warm fuzzies, they
Right.
like they feel the feelings.
There's a
Okay,
reason that works. Yeah.
yeah, I want to switch gears and talk about let's like go way past this. um, way past this cuz I'm thinking about potential B2B customers who are like my budget's really tight and I love AI and I want to use it. Like, what are some like recent innovations you've seen with AI that could impact or support a narrative storytelling format?
Yeah, I mean, drawing from my own experience, I don't think I'd be as like prolific and as productive without the use of, generative like chatbots like ChatGPT used sparingly because you
Hmm.
can't rely on all of it.
Remember when we were looking at stories and it gave us a bunch of fake stories?
Oh yeah. Yeah, if you ask it for, ideas, it will hallucinate to no end, right? And
Yes.
and though today's models are a bit better at that, still you take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
Even if it hallucinated a dozen story ideas, I think having someone like a sounding board is so important when you're
Mm,
developing these things because you have thoughts, you have feelings, and saying them out loud, communicating them to someone can give you a good indication of like, does this resonate? Does this hit? The other person might be like, I don't get it.
right.
Right. And whether or not you have the conviction to keep pushing, you want to bring something to the table that they say, oh, I didn't know that, or that's so cool, or like, I get why you want to tell that story.
Yeah, those aha moments are like such a dopamine hit.
They are. And while, ChatGPT is not going to offer you a lot of critical feedback in that sense, it is going to probably applaud everything you do. They're designed to make you happy,
Yeah.
right? That is what they're supposed to do. But having that back and forth early on, before you start to bring people behind the scenes, having that lead up to really refine and distill down, what am I trying to say? What do
Mm,
I want to do? Having somebody spit that back at me like a chatbot, like I get critical of my own idea. No, that's not it. No,
right.
that's not it. Oh, that's interesting, right? And so I come to the table with a much clearer picture of how do I want to tell the story? How do I want, what's my way in?
It's almost like you've already verbally processed it before you bring it to
Mhm.
other humans.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a dry run, right,
Mhm.
of those things. And having that companion that's always on and they're never too tired to like, you send a
Yeah,
Slack at
you can
1 in the
go at like
morning and
3
it's
in
like,
the
hey, what do you think
morning.
of this idea? You know, like
Mhm.
that response, that dopamine hit you get from like that immediate feedback, um, I think keeps you pushing through when you hit walls, right? You're able to overcome those a little bit easier. So that for me is the biggest one. I know there's like a billion innovations. I can't keep up with all of them,
Right.
but that one has probably been the most useful.
Speaking of feedback and getting internal buy-in, what would you say to a marketer who wants to pitch a narrative podcast to their boss
Hmm.
versus like a chat cast? Or, I
Right.
mean, we know that sometimes just pitching a podcast is a big deal to companies. So
Hmm.
pitching a narrative podcast is like advanced in my mind. So
Yeah.
what would you say to help that person pitch it internally?
So there are a couple pieces of advice that come to mind right away. And I'll start with probably the easiest, which is create and like define a common language, right? A lexicon. What do I mean when I say narrative?
Mm.
Right? What does that mean to me versus what does that mean to you? What does it mean to the audience? Kind of like get on the same page with communicating that to people within. Um, so you all have like the same picture of what is this thing we're looking at.
I guess you could do that by like providing examples
Mhm.
too.
Like in your research, you're like, hey,
Mhm.
this is an example of a narrative that supports the mission and vision of the brand. Here it's done well, here it's done poorly. But the second thing is once you feel confident that you're both thinking of the same thing, you have to consider what story would be emotionally provocative to that person you're pitching to.
Mm.
Don't try to convince them that a story is worth telling without first thinking, what story
About a
would they
story
want to
yourself.
hear?
Mm.
Yeah. What
Wow,
what
that's
are they
challenging.
compelled by? Yeah, it is. You have to like there's human psychology. You have to understand within the context of how they operate within the company. You have to somehow, like you can look on LinkedIn, you can see the things that they find compelling and understand like there's a part of the world that they find interesting, that they see as relevant to the company. And if you find a way to tell stories within that, you know, under that umbrella or within that sandbox, you make the connection, right? They can
Mhm.
see, oh, yeah, that's interesting to me. And
Yeah.
so our egos say, well, it must be interesting to other people. Do we have data on that? Et cetera, et cetera. But that creates the spark. It's almost like they can find a way to adopt it as their own idea. Oh, I thought
Mhm.
of other ways that we can tell stories. And now I'm looking at the numbers, the data that support its efficacy, you know, in our plans.
What do you think about the idea of narrative podcasts building community? Like, is that an important piece of the pitch, or is that like later, a lag indicator?
I guess it would depend on like the project, the
The
product,
brand
the
goals.
brand goals. Yeah. I mean, going back to the example of Traceroute, Equinix Metal had a vested interest in the health of the developer community, right?
Mm-hmm. It was
Because they,
for the community.
yeah,
Yeah.
they see them as not only their primary customer base, but their ambassadors. Because when somebody in tech adopts a tool or a service that makes their life better, they will evangelize on their own, right? You look at the comment section of a video on YouTube about a particular endeavor, project, product, whatever, and you see comments on comments and comments, like all these
Mm-hmm.
threads indicate that these people all are trying to align on like, how do we do this? How does this work for us? How does this make our lives better? In that sense, I think narrative working to kind of like I think represent that community talking about the things that they care about, the ways that this world, this industry impacts their lives, both positively and negatively.
I mean, I'm like the type of person that would read comments, the whole comment thread.
Yep.
I'm like, I want to know, even if it's for a company, I just want to know, like a review on a product. Like, I want to see what other people have to say and then what they're saying to each other. I'm like all in.
And that's not always the case, right? There's a lot of situations where either the customer base is so large, so wide, especially B2C, right? Your customer base is going to be much larger than in B2B, perhaps, right?
Yeah, much more
very
niche.
focused. So that's why I think community building within the B2B world, because these industry folks will talk at conferences and workshops and seminars and even within just the threads on LinkedIn or YouTube, they connect to one another and they want to know, how's everybody else doing this well? Because all of it is hard. All of it is challenging.
Yeah. Well, I feel like anyone listening to this could be up to the challenge with pitching this internally, because the importance of bringing it back to what you said at the beginning, just like evoking or eliciting emotions and then tying it to a brand, just like we see in the B2C world. There's this format of podcasting or any kind of storytelling really sets B2B apart in a special way.
I think so too. And we've seen just in the past few years the growth of storytelling and enriching and even tangentially like emotionally engaging storytelling around services and products. And I think the results kind of speak for themselves in a lot of ways. And I don't have the data in front of me, but the fact that more brands, more teams are beginning to adopt these, I think indicates to me that they can see the value in narrative and bringing characters into the story, because then it solidifies this idea that this product or service or brand creates a positive impact on the people that interface with it. And I hear the ways in which this world impacts them, and now I can envision the ways that my work, my efforts, and my messaging can do the same. B2B Creatively is powered by Stories Bureau. This episode was produced by Alexandra Uresta with help from Mathur de Leon. It was engineered and mixed by Tim Ballant and edited by Joshua Ramsey. If you like what you hear, go follow Stories Bureau on LinkedIn, where Alisa, Corey, and the rest of the team are dishing out tips all week long. Or maybe check out storiesbureau.com. Sign up for our newsletter, and that'll keep you up to date on all the latest trends and best practices in the B2B creative, design, and marketing worlds. Oh, and of course, follow us on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform to get more creative convos like this delivered straight to your feed every month. That's it for this one. So until next time, thanks for listening.